no bias, used with no expectations, delivering nothing but the truth. This is Daily Updates reporting for today, November 19, 2022. On to the headlines. What is land agrarian reform? Effects of colonizing periods, history of land reform in the Philippines in the pre-Spanish era. History of land reform in the Philippines in the Spanish era. Four classes of state proprietors. First Philippine Republic, the American regime, the American era, Commonwealth period, martial law and the Fourth Republic, Presidential Decree number 27, two aspects of land distribution, the Fifth Republic.
Good day, historians. This is Daily One Updates, currently live today, November 21, 2022. And I'm Elise Melano. Let's talk about what is land or agrarian reform. Land reform refers to a wide variety of programs and measures, usually by the government, to bring about more effective control and use of land for the benefit of the community. Land reform generally comprises the takeover of land by the state from big landlords for compensation and transfer it to small farmers or landless workers. It is aimed at changing the agrarian structure to bring equity to increase productivity. The structure includes both the relationship of man to his land and man's relationship with others.
Thank you, Ms. Elise. I agree that agrarian reform is more complex. Along with land reform, it also includes measures to modernize the agricultural practices and improve the living conditions of everyone within the entire agrarian community.
Yes, Ms. Shane, and it includes various supports to agricultural education, the establishment of the cooperatives, development of institutions to provide agricultural credit and other inputs, processing and marketing of agricultural produce and establishment of agro-based industries and others.
Absolutely, Mr. Brian, and the desire to obtain social justice and full development of the indignity of man within given situation of land reform has gained great importance across the year in many countries of the world, especially in agricultural countries.
I just want to add, Ms. Joseph, one of the effects of the colonizing period was the concentration of the land holding in the hands of the law. These few people, whom they called landlords or caciques, have yielded tremendous influence in the social and economic life of the nation. They have been able to dictate their dependents, tenants, and the families, just a matter as to whom vote in the political elections. They become also influence political action in a various way in order to maintain the status quo.
To our next news, the history of land reform in the Philippines in the pre-Spanish era. Before the Spaniards came to the Philippines, the Filipino social system was feudal, like the feudalistic system in medieval Europe. A warrior class existed bound by fealty to a warlord. This class lived on the labor of the serfs and slaves, but in exchange, this warrior class protected them and exercised a ready, though rough kind of justice. Within the Filipino structure, the datus or chiefs comprise the nobility or the mahalikas. Then there are the timawas or freemen, followed by the aliping na mamahay or serfs and aliping sa gigilid. The freeborn did not pay tributes or taxes to the datu but were bound to follow him to war. They provided their own weapons and gears, manned the cars when they set sail, built their houses, and planted their rice fields.
And after they provide their own weapons and gears, the serfs served his master or lord, who may be a datu or someone else who is a maharlika and tilled his land. Both master and serfs equally divided the produce of the land. They had houses of their own, maintained private property, and passed this on to their children as legacy. They were also allowed the free disposal of their chattels and their lands. The serfs corresponded to the upper ceros of the late 19th century Spanish era. The slaves served the lord or master in both his house and farm. They were allowed some share of the harvest, but they were their master's property. Thus, they could be sold, particularly those captured in wars or born and reared as farm hands. In the subsistence economy of the early Filipinos, money was unknown and rice served as a medium of exchange.
Thank you, Ms. Shane and Elise. After the pre-Spanish era, now let's talk about the history of land reform in the Philippines in the Spanish era, year 1565 to 1898. During the Spanish colonial period, lands were divided and granted to encourage Spanish settlers or reward soldiers who served the crown. In the consideration of these services, the encomendero acquired the right to collect tribute from Indus natives in the amount form determined by the royal government. The encomienda system was originally established more for the benefit of the natives than the encomenderos. The system, however, degenerated into abuse of power by the encomenderos. The encomenderos became the first group of hacienderos in the country. Meanwhile, the colonial government took place of the datos.
There were four classes of states proprietors in the Philippines during the Spanish period. First, the religious order Dominican and Australian. Second, the Spanish peninsulars. Third, the Criollos and Mestizos. And lastly, the native principals. The Dominican prior leased their land to both the native and mestizos, who became known as inliquinos. Each inliquino paid a fixed ground rent of the area he cultivated, and the estate's owner has not allowed to lease the land to other unless the incumbent leaseholder failed to pay the rent for 2 consecutive years. However, the inliquinos abused this policy by disposing of the land as if they owned them. They sold their interest in them or mortgaged that wealthy takers or subleased them at rent higher than what they themselves paid. Thus, by being inliquinos, they earned more than the estate's owner without doing virtually
This became
any
part
work.
of a system in which native agricultural entrepreneurs got tilled and cleared the land with the aid of tenants whom they hired on a sharecropping basis. They had to lease the land. In time, the system evolved a set of the practice and soon began to exploit the tenant tenures. Although Spanish authorities were aware of this pernicious practice, no effective measures were made in spite of 2 royal decrees issued in 1880 and 1884, urging landholders to secure titles. Under these decrees, the government granted a term of 1 year within which claims for free titles were to be filed, but because of the large majority of the peasants either did not understand the law or found procedure too complicated and alien to tradition, who youth took the advantage of the offer.
Spanish land practices came to a halt with the outbreak of the Philippine Revolution, when Spanish landowners started to sell off their lands as brought about by the power shift in government, where Spain was on a losing side against the Filipinos who had declared their independence in 1898, and the Americans were insisting to stay. First Philippine Republic 1899 to 1901. Immediately after the establishment of the First Republic of the Philippines on January of 1899, the government of President Emilio Aguinaldo declared its intention to confiscate large estates, especially the so-called friar lands. The declaration was contained in the Malolos Constitution. All the lands, buildings, and other properties belonging to the religious corporation in this island shall be understood to have been restored to the Filipino state. However, as the republic was short-lived, Aguinaldo's plan was never implemented.
Thank you, reporters, and have a good morning to all. Now let's talk about the American regime. This is Ezekiel Antonio, your news reporter for today. During the American era, several laws were passed to regulate and improve land tenure. Among the significant legislative pieces were the Philippine Bill of 1902 imposed specific conditions on the disposition of public lands, the Land Registration Act of 1902, Act No. 496, provided for a comprehensive registration of land titles under the torrent system. The next one is Rice Share Tenancy Act of 1933, Act No. 4054, regulated relationship between landowners and tenants of rice lands, and lastly, Tenancy Act of 1933, Act No. 4113, regulated relationship between landowners and tenants of sugarcane fields.
Stand for a bit, Mr. Ezekiel. I'll just give some information about the American era. At the start of the American era, some 400,000 native farmers were without titles because of the defective land system, rooted in Spanish institutions and of the farmers' ignorance of various laws. To remedy the problem, the Americans introduced the torrent system of land registration whereby government-purchased titles were granted only after the completion of a survey and land ownership had been proven in court. This, however, did not solve the problem completely. As with the Spanish system, the majority of farmers did not avail of the government's offer. Either they were not aware of the law, or if they did, they could not pay the survey costs and other fees required in applying for a torrent title. As for the friar lands, even American authorities could not touch them as these were covered by valid land titles issued during the Spanish era. Furthermore, the Treaty of Paris 1898 bound the U.S. government to protect the property interests of religious orders.
States of agrarian reform. During the Commonwealth, under the administration of former Manuel L. Quezon, various armed conflicts were built up due to malingering problem of the land tenure, relationship between landlord and tenant. Revolts in certain areas of the country happened particularly in the province of Pangasinan and Laguna. By this time, various laws and policies were established to protect and promote land settlement among the landowners and tenants.
Manuel Rojas, Republic Act No. 34 amends RA 4054, established a 70-30 sharing arrangement between tenant and landlord. It provided that whoever shouldered the expenses of planting and harvesting and provided the work animals would be entitled to 70% of the harvest. It also reduced the interest on landowner loans to tenant at no more than 6% instead of 10%. Elpidio Quirino Executive Order No. 355 replaced the National Land Settlement Administration with Land Settlement Development Corporation, which took over the responsibilities of the Agricultural Machinery Equipment Corporation and the Rice and Corn Production Administration. Ramon Magsaysay. Under the Magsaysay administration, the following were accomplished. Republic Act No. 1166, Creation of National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration. Republic Act No. 1199, Agricultural Tenancy Act provided security of tenure for tenants. It also granted tenants the choice of shifting from share tenancy to leasehold. It also created the Courts of Agrarian Relations. Republic Act No. 1400, Land Reform Act provided for the acquisition of large tenanted rice and corn lands over 200 hectares if owned by individuals, 600 hectares if owned by corporations.
Diosdado Macapagal. Under the Macapagal administration, the Republic Act No. 3844, otherwise known as the Agricultural Land Reform Code, was enacted. It abolished share tenancy, institutionalized leasehold, invested the rights of preemption and redemption for tenant farmers, provided for administrative machinery for implementation, institutionalized a judicial system of agrarian cases, incorporated extension, marketing, and supervised credit system of services to farmer beneficiaries. Next is the martial law in the Fourth Republic under Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Under the Marcos administration, the following were accomplished. Republic Act No. 6389 instituted Code of Agrarian Reform and created the Department of Agrarian Reform. Presidential Decree No. 2, which placed the whole country under the Land Reform Program. And lastly, Presidential Decree No. 27, which restricted the land reform scope to tenanted rice and corn lands.
In the martial law era, President Marcos signed a Presidential Decree 27 ordering freedom of farmers from the bondage of the soil and automatically amortizing the owner of the land he tills. The decree focused on two aspects for land distribution. First, rice and corn farmland to be transferred due to social unrest associated. And lastly, through financing by fixing the value of the land at relatively modest rate and directing compensation that may be paid directly by the farmer to the landowner.
Beneficiaries of Presidential Decree 27, bona fide tenant farmer of private agricultural land devoted to rice and corn are benefited with an economic size farm fixed at 3 hectares of irrigated lands and maximum of 5 hectares for non-irrigated. Retention limit of Presidential Decree 27, landowners may retain an area not more than 7 hectares on conditions that each landowner is cultivating such area. Letter of Instruction 143, October 31, 1973, compels landowner to transfer to their tenant, if determined by DAR to be absentee farmer with sources of income other than their holdings. Letter of Instruction 474, October 21, 1976, provides that tenanted areas of 7 hectares or less could be placed under Presidential Decree 27 if the owner owned other agricultural lands not devoted to rice and corn or other lands used for residential, industrial, or other urban purposes from which they receive adequate income to support themselves and their families.
Executive Order Number 1298 reorganized, streamlined, and expanded power and operation of DAR. Executive Order Number 228 declared full ownership to qualified farmer beneficiaries covered by PD 27. It also provided for the manner of payment by the farmer beneficiary and the mode of compensation to the landowners. Executive Order Number 229 provided mechanism for the implementation of CARP such as administrative procedure and mechanics for land registration, private land acquisition, and mode of compensation to the landowners. Republic Act Number 6657, Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, it is an act instituting a comprehensive agrarian reform program to promote social justice and industrialization, providing the mechanism for its implementation and for other purposes. The Fifth Republic under the former President Corazon Aquino. The achievements of the Cory Aquino administration on agrarian reform is as follows. 1987 Constitution, Article 2, Section 21, which states that the state shall promote comprehensive rural development and agrarian reform. Proclamation Number 131 institutionalized the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, CARP, and Agrarian Reform Fund, ARF, which covers all agricultural lands regardless of tenural arrangement and commodity produced. All public and private agricultural lands and other lands of public domain suitable to agriculture.
To strengthen comprehensive agrarian reform program and speed up its implementation, President Aquino issued in June 1990 3 key executive orders, namely: 1. Executive Order Number 405 vested in the Land Bank of the Philippines the primary responsibility for land valuation. 2. Executive Order Number 406 countryside agro-industrial development and directed the implementing agencies to align their respective programs. 3. Executive Order Number 407 directed all government instrumentalities including financial institutions and corporations to turn over to DAR all land suitable for agriculture for coverage under CARP.
You have just heard the latest news again. This is the Daily One Updates, news with no bias, news with no exception, delivering nothing but the truth. Thank you for being with us. Mabuhay, Philippines!
Thank you.